So kind of a hot topic. How do I know if the data that I submit to all these SaaS services and apps is really anonymous? Well, first, let's start off by distinguishing anonymity from data security. Where I say data security is the ability to get information from point A to point B without it being intercepted or read. Data anonymity is more about what happens when that information reaches point B, usually somewhere on a cloud server, and want to be sure that your web browsing history or your location or your purchase history or your blood type isn't, being tracked precisely to your user identifier. So a couple challenges with data anonymity. The first is what I call the degree of anonymity, and the second is what I call the ability to reverse it. And they're both kind of two sides of the same coin. So as an example, for the degree of anonymity, let's take a look at an offline analogy. Let's say I walk into a grocery store and I purchase a cantaloupe precisely at 12:57 p.m. And the data collection people at the grocery store assure me that my cantaloupe purchase is totally anonymous. But also at the same time, they're tracking my credit card transaction, which also happens at 12:57 p.m. And obviously it's attached to my name. And at some point in the future, somebody could say, hey, you know what? Let's correlate that data. There was only one transaction that happened in this store at 12:57 p.m. And sure enough, here's the credit card swipe and here's the cantaloupe purchase. And it's not very hard to correlate those two pieces of data. It doesn't take a great data scientist to do that, even if that data is stored in totally separate systems, right? Well, you say, okay, that's kind of a simplistic example, and that's right. But even if it was much further removed, that data can oftentimes be reversed, which brings us to the second point, which is the reversibility of the data. And again, it doesn't take a data scientist. I've had people just kind of hacking around in databases looking at stuff and seeing, wow, isn't it really nice and easy to correlate, this purchase history or this health information with some information over here that's supposedly totally separate, but the reality is you can look at dates and times and places and zip codes that things occurred, and you can correlate the data. So, what does this really lead us to? Well, here's the challenge, is when people say anonymous, there's not necessarily one standard for that. You could have companies that really take it seriously and are absolutely, stripping your ID out and scrambling the data and making it something that's very hard to reverse engineer. But if you think about it, the same companies that promise data anonymity, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Facebook or what have you, are also the same ones on the pioneering edge of machine learning. And machine learning's goal is to actually correlate disparate pieces of data, right? So that's something to think about. And I have two sort of action items from this. The first is be very careful what you download on your device. I mean, you all know when you download, for example, a keyboard for your iOS or Android device, it's going to tell you, hey, watch out, your keystrokes are being logged. Well, the reason the app developer does that is so they can see the accuracy of your typing on the keypad and make the words more accurate. But they're also tracking the words, the phrases, the email address, the websites that you type in. So if they really anonymize that data, great, no problem. But if they don't, understand that every password you type could be in a SaaS cloud somewhere and eventually correlated and stolen by a hacker, right? The second action item I would say, so be careful with that. The second action item is to consider what companies you support, what government legislation you support, that kind of thing, and understand that data anonymity eventually is going to need a much firmer standard to which companies are held. And I hate to say this as a software developer and an app developer, but those types of standards ultimately I think are going to benefit people and benefit app developers by keeping us on the same page. So consider what you support and how you support it. Feel free to discuss below, and we'll try and get back to you with any comments that you have.